share in getting that store-bought quality look to an apple, and it usually means a fungicide or an insecticide every 7 to 14 days. So apples are challenging. Not that the tree won't grow, but if you pick the wrong variety, say a Golden Delicious, and then in August, there's no leaves on the tree because you have juniper trees or you have the cedar apple rust, those orange balls that are on the seed, you know, all of a sudden that gets airborne, it grows up on the apple leaves. The apple leaves get infiltrated with all this cedar apple rust, and then boom, the leaves just give up, and there's no photosynthesis to ripen the apple in the fall. And a lot of apples get fire blight, they get powdery mildew, they get apple scab. So it's not the prettiest tree in your front yard anymore, unless you find a variety that doesn't get those major problems with disease. So a lot of, well, the University of in Purdue knew a lot about this, and they had an apple breeder, and for 25 years, he would take Floribunda, which was an apple species, a crab apple, that didn't get any of these diseases, and he started crossing it with the popular apples of the day, trying to get disease resistance into apples that would be like the apples that everybody's used to, so that you wouldn't have to spray for the different diseases. So after 25 years, what he would do is he'd have like 2 acres of apple seedlings about this big, right? And he'd go in with powdery mildew sprays in the summer, and he'd spray them all. And there'd be like 1 or 2 standing. Those are the ones that went on into his work. So they did this and they introduced basically the meat of what we sell. One's called Enterprise, one's called Pristine, one is Williams Pride, and these apples don't get fire blight, they don't get powdery mildew, they don't get cedar apple rust, so that you have a really pretty apple pretty much year-round. It looks good.
Williams, what was that? Williams what?
Williams Pride. That's an early apple. It's real shiny red. Ripens like first, second week in July.
What does it taste like?
It tastes kind of mac-like. It's an early apple, so it has more tartness. Most of your early apples are more tart. The Pristine is early too. It's yellow, although it's better tasting than the Lodi or any of the other early applesauce apples, I believe. It's really good. The Enterprise is more like a Fuji. Fuji gets scab. Pink Lady is really hard to grow. It gets fire blight, scab, cedar apple rust. So, and that's what happens this time of year. People see the catalogs and they start buying the apples they're used to in the stores. I like this flavor. This is great. And I think what they should do is just go to their local, commercial grower and get those apples, because they're not easy to grow.
How far south are we talking with these varieties?
Excuse me?
How far south are we talking with these varieties?
7B, 8A. I don't know if you go any further. You know, apples, if you go to Vermont right now, you'll see apples dormant along the roadsides. People can go and pick them. You know, the further north you go, apples are just a lot easier to grow than down here. That's for sure. All right, well, man, we're just really going slow here. But we covered apples pretty well. And really, when we're covering apples, think of the other commercial crops like peaches and plums, and all of these have some real drawbacks as far as growing them in the yard. And I've probably got some people in here that are past the 101 stage of edible landscaping. Maybe you guys have had some experience with peaches or plums or something, and if you want to share that, that's great. We'll go off on that. So this is an old variety called Arkansas Black. You can see it's definitely the darkest apple you'll probably see in the food markets. It really shines up. It also makes, that's a fresh apple juice. It also makes like a red juice. So I like this variety a lot. So sometimes the colonials, the people that started bringing seed from Europe, there was already some wild apples growing in America. So you kind of got some hybrids, and I'm sure that the Aboriginals, they had a lot of different fruits, that they selected over the thousands of years that they were here. So a little bit of crossbreeding probably happened, and also homesteads, prairie areas or mountainous areas, you started getting apples that just did well by themselves without any breeding or intent. And so Arkansas Black was probably one of those. Probably in the 1800s it came about. And there's other ones too. But I know everybody wants to grow the old English cider apples and different varieties like that of antiquity. A lot of people get into a big hobby of growing them all. And so many of them are very challenging to grow. Really hard to grow. When you think of the climate there, it varies so much from the hot, humid, rainy climate we have here in Virginia. So a lot of those varieties aren't worth the time you're gonna spend on trying to grow them. Yeah.
What do you think about the Honeycrisp craze?
Honeycrisp is not that bad of an apple, but I think it does get cedar apple rust. But it's fairly disease resistant. So yeah, that's about all I can say for it because I haven't given it a good shake.
Any of them do better in moist soil than others?
Well, that would be probably rootstock or if it was a seedling. And they'll grow in, like if it rains in the spring, you've got splashy water for a day or two. I don't see them dying in that situation, but they can't stay in wet soil all the time. I think that it would kind of it would stunt them, and then they'd probably get woolly apple aphid, which is a root aphid that really sucks the life out of the rootstock. You had a question?
Just to address the Honeycrisp, there's a farm in Atlanta, Beach Creek. He does not like this one. Now that again, he grows 100 varieties, and that's his experience, but he doesn't have good success.
Yeah, and even in Virginia, the Honeycrisp they're green with a red blush because it's a Minnesota apple.
Right.
It basically is. It's a very far north apple. I didn't know I knew so much about it. So that's an Asian pear tree there. Asian pears were kind of a surprise, and pears as a whole family are kind of a surprise to me in growing them. There's a lot of varieties, and most of the varieties that you find in catalogs or that you find in the food stores don't grow in Virginia. They get fire blight. Fire blight's a disease where one day the plant looks really great, and the next day it looks like somebody lit a match to it, and there's just all the leaves are dark, almost black, and the stems turn black, and the plant dies. So any variety that we sell can't have that happen to it. It has to be fire blight resistant. Even when we do all these fire blight resistant apples, I'll still get a call sometimes, and somebody will say, "Oh, my Potomac pear, it just got fire blight terribly and died." And I'm like, "What?" And my Potomac pear at our orchard has never had fire blight. It's 15 years old, 20 years old. So I kind of scratch my head with that one. I guess the conditions were right for his particular situation. Yeah.
If you've had fire blight on a tree and you want to plant like a different fruit tree in that area, is there any sanitation or anything you need to do?
I don't think so because fire blight is airborne. It's just prevalent. It's just an organism that exists in our environment. So it's not that one particular spot will harbor the disease.
Okay.
And it's not really a root disease either. It's airborne. So what's nice about pears is there's this crazy bug called plum curculio. It's a little weevil, with a snout, so it looks like an insect that's an anteater, with this long. And she goes around and she crawls around the tree. She's kind of clumsy because she's got this rhinoceros kind of plate to her body. And she's only about that long, but she will take her little snout and make a little crescent moon. And then she'll turn around and she'll plug an egg right by that place where she messed up the skin of the fruit. And the little larvae feeds on that dead tissue, and then it bores into the fruit. And then it comes out the other side. So it's that basic worm in your fruit. There's other worms in peaches and things like Oriental fruit moth and all. But this plum curculio really likes peaches, loves plums. It's called plum curculio. And it really likes apples and pears. Pears is its least favorite. And pears are hard when they start coming on. And I think that may be a reason. The harder the apple, the less susceptible that injury is going to happen. It's going to be because the little larvae starts going into the apple expands, and it's like a late apple would be such a hard apple like that Arkansas black. It actually squishes the larvae. So you'll see a little bit of a damage on the fruit, but you won't have the worm in the fruit, which is really interesting. Yeah.
Real quick, can I go back to apples for just a second?
Yeah.
With the cedar apple rust, what is the radius from where trees, like, where it's present on cedars to plant an apple tree?
Oh, well, when the cedar balls, have you ever seen those on the junipers? They're like, they look really funny. They're looks like some alien things coming and growing on the tree. But they have orange spores. When the wind comes, those spores can go 3 miles.
3 miles, okay.
3 miles, yeah, at least. They just float in the air until they attach themselves to a host. Now, we are surrounded by woods, so we don't have that many cedars, so we don't get that much cedar apple rust. But even then, if we had a cedar apple rust variety, a susceptible variety, it gets covered, even then. So it just happens. So what I wanted to say about the Asian pears and the European pears is there are 2 drawbacks with the fire blight and plum curculio. Well, we've kind of remedied that with variety. And so we do have some really good varieties. And so pears are not a problem. They're a small tree. They're pretty easy to grow. And really, really great to enjoy. A good pear, most Americans don't know how, like a European pear, when you bite into it, how vinous and sweet it can be, and how delicious. And the Asian pears too. This is a Korean giant pear, and oh my gosh, the fruits can get really large if you thin the fruit a bit, and they're really, really sweet. It's amazing how sweet they are, because if you go to Whole Foods and you buy a Asian pear right now, it'll probably taste more like celery or something that's something that's kind of almost sweet. But if you let them hang on the tree, they just get sweeter and sweeter. America is known for picking green fruit. Even my area that depended on Queen Victoria back a long time ago for their Albemarle Pippin apples, there was no taxes or levy on Albemarle Pippin apples from Virginia. They loved us, and they loved that apple. And one year, we sent it to them green. That was it. All of a sudden, there was no money in Nelson County. It was like, bam. It just happened. People had to dig up their trees because they lost that huge account. Anyway, how did I get off on that? So there's that's probably the Shinko pear. This is a European pear, and this one's doing really well at our nursery. There's 3 pears like this: the Magnus, the Honey Sweet, and the Warren. And all 3 are about that size and about that shape, and very sweet, very good pears. Okay, so we've gone to elderberries. Boy, we are switching. So elderberry is just a bush. It doesn't get any worms, and it's native. It doesn't get any real problems. And I'm just really tickled that elderberry syrup and different tinctures and things have become so popular. They'll have pedestals in Whole Foods now of around this time, food remedy, and it's all